Phoenix Suns get back on track with a road win in Denver on Tuesday night, national TV. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, how did they pull this off without Devin Booker? Why do they match up so well with the Nuggets? And what can we learn from this game? We'll break it all down right away. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen post-game after a 117-107 victory over the Denver Nuggets on the road. We are free and available everywhere, every day. That is including YouTube, where you can watch the show. So hit follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Become an everydayer and get locked onto the Phoenix Suns all season long from here on out. Joining me for the first time in a couple of weeks, as he does every week, Brandon Dueñas. He is a writer over at Bright Side of the Sun. Just got done recapping for that fine website this insane game. We see another fourth quarter collapse, Brandon, by the Suns, and then they just hang on to get into overtime and blow the doors off of Denver from there. So I will toss it over to you for our moment of the game. I'm assuming we will both pick a moment from the chaos late in this one, but what specifically do you feel like decided this big win for the Suns?
Yeah, first of all, what a game. I mean, just roller coaster of emotions. Denver's not an easy place to win. They're 24-5 there, so it's to go in their home court and take them down without Booker is huge. And I think to segue into your question, I think that it has to be Kevin Durant's just clutch shots, and just he shot 14 for 34 in the game, and he just did not let that faze him late. And I think we've seen in the past he'd get a little passive if he's having an off shooting night. Tonight, I don't care how much he was struggling early on. I'm just glad he let it fly and just hit those big shots and kind of reminded us why he's Kevin Durant and why you make that trade. These are the moments he lives for. So, to me, just those step backs, just to really kind of add to that really fun overtime that just kind of came out of nowhere after the snooze fest of an offensive fourth quarter.
Yeah, I believe he had 0 threes until there were 34 seconds left in the game and finishes with 3 made threes. And I mean, it's one of those things that can be easy to overlook because it's Kevin Durant. We've seen him do this a million times, but I think it shouldn't be ignored to step up when you've been that cold for a whole half, basically. Like, the third quarter went fine for the Suns. They had 25 points. They got outscored by 6, but it felt like it had been a while since he felt like he was in rhythm after a solid first quarter. And to just step up, you're getting, bombarded by the defense. You're getting stonewalled on your drives. Every shot's difficult, and just step up and nail a shot like that with 30 seconds left to even give yourself a chance to win, and then obviously do it in overtime it's crazy. It's why this guy is a legend.
Yeah, I mean, him and Beal both taking turns in the fourth, or in the overtime, I should say, was awesome. It just seemed like they suddenly got like a second life, or just like a second wind of energy, which in Denver and in that altitude game in overtime, it's not easy to have that type of energy to close out a game, and for them to do that in that stage, in that environment, with Denver just having all the momentum, and like you said, just Durant's not really, his willingness to shoot threes at times can waver, and I think the fact that he just let him fly, like that's what they need out of him. I don't care if he's 0 for 14, like I want him to still shoot his next 6 shots just with the same amount of confidence as if he was 14 for 14. So they were huge. Shout out Grayson Allen also, monster game, that they would not even be in that position early on without his hot shooting. So major kudos to him as well.
Yeah, I mean, could have picked Grayson's flurry in the first half as a defining moment of this game, even though obviously it ended up getting much closer than the 15 points that the Suns led by at the half when it was all said and done, 15. But I was going to pick that Beal 3 with about 4 minutes left as my moment of the game because he was also cold. I mean, everybody was cold. They only scored 12 points. We just talked about 6 of them, right? So, like, that's all the evidence you need of the dire place this team was in. And it was the same thing. Beal just comes off of a screen, nails a pull-up 3, kind of top of the key right wing like it's nothing, like as if they're in the middle of a 40-point quarter. And he has a knack for those types of things. Maybe you notice them more because he's had such a weird season and he's obviously sort of the guy that puts the team over the top in general when he's really rolling. But there was he had a block the other night that was a similar type of energy play. I feel like I want to say that the Lakers game, he had a few of these. Like, he just seems to bring it. You know, he'll have some lazy plays. He will have some moments where you're scratching your head a little bit, but he follows that 3 up with, I thought, a nice defensive possession to contest the 3. I think KCP ended up making it, but he just kind of clicks in that way too, and I guess that's what you need if you're going to struggle in the fourth quarter. But I had a question since we're talking about both of these guys, which is the flow, the balance in that fourth quarter. I'll just say, I know there was a lot of discussion coming off of the last game against the Thunder of how much energy was being put into dumping it into Durant and the lack of creativity with all of that, and I talked about that on the show, but in this game, it wasn't so much that, but it was just Durant initiating in the first place. Possessions starting with the ball in Durant's hands, despite Beal being out there. I thought they could have used a little bit more balance there, especially once it became clear Durant didn't have it going. And there were a lot of moments where Beal just wasn't really involved.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think especially, like, it's going to be a lot easier to use Beal as a screener with Booker and Durant out there, where you can kind of get him involved in that sense, with Book kind of being a little more ball dominant and then bringing the ball up and getting it to Durant in those positions and using Beal to screen to really create some chaos. That's kind of the big picture vision. But yeah, whenever it's just 2 of the 3, which unfortunately that's what it's been most of the season, you got to figure out different ways to adapt. And I think getting Beal some more action, and I thought bringing in Saban Lee too, just trying to mix things up and put any sort of like flow of life into the offense. Like they definitely tried some things, but it really wasn't working, and it just kind of goes back to the fourth quarter. It just feels like it's at first it was just one of those things where it's just mental, or it's just coincidence, whatever, and then we get so deep in the season, it's just repetitive at this point. So it feels like they're almost waiting for it to happen. When the game slows down, they just lose that flow of the offense, where the ball just needs to move. Like, at the end of the day, it's not about any 1 or 2 guys getting the ball more. Like, it's about the whole team touching the ball. That's when they're at their best. So they just got to keep the ball flowing. Also, another shout out to Drew Eubanks. That he was huge, probably his best game of the season, I think, in terms of just some of the little things he did, the offensive rebounds. He's officially the Jokic stopper, so that was fun. But yeah, shout out to Eubanks. He played hard, and he gets a lot of crap. So whenever he plays well, you gotta fire it back. Well,
and to cut the team some slack with the fourth quarter and the balance stuff that I'm talking about a little bit, even though I don't think they necessarily deserve it in game number 62 overall, but in this one, Nurkic fouling out obviously shifts the game quite a bit, right? So you miss his ball movement. You look at the starting lineup, everybody had at least 4 assists. So when all 5 of those guys were out there, I think you would have to say the flow was good, the balance was good. And so the missing link in that fourth quarter situation late in this game was him. And so I'm sure that contributed. Felt like, if you had asked me how many threes Royce O'Neal made in this game, I would have said he was like 1 of 15. It felt like he could not make one. Maybe all of his misses were condensed. Fortunately, the Denver Nuggets also missed a lot of shots, and they helped the Suns out by having a pretty poor fourth quarter themselves while the Suns are clanking shots and Nuggets are getting a bunch of offensive rebounds and everything seems to be going wrong. They can't make a shot, and it keeps the Suns within striking distance and obviously allows them to pull out the win. So let's kind of flip over to the Denver side and get a little more specific about the matchup, what we saw in this game, big picture, and our main takeaway from this game, which is the Suns might actually match up with this Denver team well, despite the elimination last year in the postseason. We'll get to all of that coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. I'm a faithful customer of eBay Motors, and you should be as well. Passion, drive, and patience are what bring home the winning trophy, and they are also what keeps your ride or die alive, and eBay Motors knows that. They have everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Keeping it rolling here, Brandon. Let's talk about this matchup. So you shouted out a couple of the other guys, Grayson Allen, Drew Eubanks, who stepped up in this win. Talked a little bit about the Nurkic foul out heading into the break there. But why have these games been close in your mind? You go back to December. Obviously, Nurkic, as a scorer, had a big impact in that game. Kevin Durant did as well. The Nuggets were missing guys. The Suns were certainly missing guys. But that one was pretty close at home for Phoenix. Ends up being a loss, but close. And then here they come on the road and beat the Nuggets. So what's been the recipe for success? What's the magic formula here? Why do you think they've been able to play up to their competition and actually match up pretty well with the reigning champions?
Well, first of all, I think in general, this team just plays up to their competition in general. Like, we look at like the Rockets and like some of these young teams that catch them off guard, and it feels like the sky is falling when they lose to them. And then against certain teams, they really rise to the occasion on an intensity level. So I think this game being on TNT in a hostile environment, like without Booker, they knew they had to be locked in to have a chance to win. So I think a lot of it with this team is mindset and just trying to figure out how to consistently stay together. I think, honestly, that first game, I don't even really measure that because these are two completely different teams, and there are so many players out for both teams in that one. I think Booker and there's another player out for the Suns, spacing it right now. But
I think Booker and Beal were both out. I think it was just
right.
Durant in that game, yeah.
Yeah, so that was just Durant, and then I think Denver's down like Murray and Gordon or something. So it was – I'm not going to take too much away from that, but I do think in this game specifically – and it goes back to even the playoff series last year, where I think Denver's one of their biggest weaknesses defensively is once you get them out of that first or second action defensively, and when they're rotating, that's when you could really punish them. And that's why the Suns last year, you saw Landry Shamet have a big game. You saw Cam Payne have a big game. When you're that third or fourth option and you could hit wide open shots, what is Denver going to do? Like that's the thing is defensively. That's why I think adding someone like Beal, I think I said this preseason too, just talking about this specific matchup. Like he's perfect for this type of matchup because of how Denver likes to play defensively. He's going to get. He wasn't even in that third option tonight. That was Grayson Allen. And we saw what he did. So I think with Book back and Durant back, playing with Beal and having those shooters in the corners, like there's a lot of stuff where Denver's going to have issues if they're not doubling Book and KD. Good luck, and if they do, there's going to be a lot of wide open shots for some deadly shooters. So that's to me just like offensively, but there's a lot of other stuff that I think makes sense. I would still rather not face them in the first round, but I think they match up better. Yeah, they match up better than you'd probably think on the surface.
Well, and compared to the other teams, I mean, that's part of why I wanted to talk about it, because the Clippers have killed the Suns in this season. Obviously, they have a playoff history, and then OKC twice now, but obviously just in this most recent game. So we'll see the Minnesota side of things soon enough. But yeah, it feels like they've been able to kind of compete here, and I don't think you're going to get a first half very often, or you're not going to get any half like this first half very often playing this Denver team where they're just turning the ball over like they were. That's probably the one thing I would say isn't really replicable. Maybe it was kind of a fluke. I didn't really feel like the Suns were necessarily just this clamping defense tonight that forced the Nuggets into a bunch of mistakes. I just think Denver was playing kind of careless and then figured it out as the game went along and cleaned that up. But your point on the defensive end, I think, is absolutely right, because you saw tonight the couple of moments where Peyton Watson's defense was able to flash. Obviously it's a credit to his talent, but there's a reason he jumps off the screen is because he's the only guy on this team outside of Aaron Gordon who really can make plays like that consistently. So they just are susceptible. They're not the most athletic team. They're big, right? They're big at every position. They're physical, but they're not, the Celtics or something where it's just a team full of versatile wing athletes. Like, you can punish them that way. And I think Beal, in a role where he is that third guy, obviously as a shooter is one thing, but I just think of the ability that he has, the success that he had beating his man tonight just kind of off the dribble. Imagine if that's attacking a closeout, attacking a rotating defense like you were talking about. That's really where you could start to see him putting together some big performances. So we may see a fully healthy matchup between these two teams in the final game. It's obviously impossible to know with this Suns group if that health will sustain, but they definitely seem to have a little bit of success. The thing I would point to is Nurkic. I feel like that's where we have to go with this, because I agree, big picture, throw out that last game, but I think Nurkic showed us his value in this matchup in that first December game even more than this one, and obviously played pretty well tonight too, but he takes this really seriously. He obviously has a history with playing for this team, being traded away to make space for Jokic, and he shows up. And I think is it even a hot take? Is it even a crazy thing to say? I trust him against Jokic more than I do Ayton, and that's including a series in 2021 where Ayton played pretty damn well against Jokic. But the physicality and the strength and the size matchup there, I just feel very comfortable with Nurkic against Jokic, against this Nuggets team.
Yeah, look, and that's a good point. That's something I didn't bring up too, is just how personal that is. Like, anytime you get traded for someone to clear a starting spot, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, as a player, as a competitor, you're going to take that personal. So I think there's always a little bit more of a chip on a shoulder every time he plays Jokic, and sometimes when you're playing against someone you're so familiar with, you can get in your head a little bit, and it's really tough. All you can do is to hope to contain Jokic. You're never going to shut him down, especially in a 7-game series. Like, he's going to get his, but you just try to make him as uncomfortable as possible. And I think Nurkic, his physicality gets in his head a little bit, and at times, but then Jokic will rattle off like 10 straight points. But still, it's those moments where you're creating those turnovers. And I thought the Suns did a good job tonight too of like digging every time Jokic was driving and just kind of poking the ball away. I think Gordon had one, Royce had one. Like, there's just a few moments where I thought they did a good job of catching him off guard a little bit on the dribble and just getting low and really just stripping the ball, which, like you said, is pretty uncharacteristic for Denver, and usually something the Suns are struggling with. So it was nice to be on the other side of that for once. But yeah, I think the Nurkic point is a valid one, and Eubanks tonight I thought stepped up. Obviously, I don't know if I want to trust him come playoff time to play heavy minutes, but that's with Nurkic's foul trouble. Like, that's just something that's probably going to be a reality. So
you're probably not getting Nurkic to match Jokic's minutes in the playoffs, right? So they're going to need something else, right? Like, I thought when the Nuggets went small off the bench, I figured it made more sense to play Thad Young, but obviously Eubanks kind of proved me wrong in the second half. So we'll see where it goes after that. But yeah, Nurkic, a lot of Jokic's game is predicated, like, he's not this guy, he's a big, so he's not gonna run a pick and roll and, beat you to the basket or like pull up from three or something. But his game is still predicated on getting to his spots or kind of being in his comfort zone, being in his element too. And on the drives you mentioned, you just have to kind of play him physically, make him a little bit a beat off here and there. And when he's in the post, kind of methodically just feeling things out, like, okay, you're not going to maybe get the ball loose or pull the chair from him or something. He's a great player, but can you stonewall him so he can take maybe one less dribble than he wants to, or make him pick his dribble up sooner than he wants to, or take a shot because he just has to rush something? Like, those are the little wins, the little victories you can take here and there. And again, this is a regular season game, but you look up in this one and it's less than 50% from the field, only 7 free throw attempts, and more turnovers and assists. Like, if you even get close to that in a playoff game, you have to feel pretty good on your chances to win, especially on the road. So I think we're seeing the makings of what that can be. But let's go to a little bit on the rotation, some box score observations from this one, and more to close out the show. First, today's episode brought to you by Betterhelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chests. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let them out, especially to someone who's unbiased about your life. Again, thing I always say when we're talking about BetterHelp, which is a service that I think is very good, is that it does not have to be based on something extreme, something very huge and killer in your life. It can just be to have somebody to talk to get things off of your chest. So with that in mind, let me tell you how I really feel about, where should we go with this one? Frank Vogel today, if we're talking about getting things off of our chest. I see people talking about firing him. Can I just say, I think Frank Vogel is a perfectly good NBA head coach. That's not like a burden of thing I'm trying to get off my chest, but it's something I feel like I need to say to the fans, something I need to say to the audience, because killing the coach is an easy thing to do. It's very, very easy and go-to for a lot of bad moments. But look, he is perfectly fine, and he is not the problem. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams or the head coach of that sports team, but it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online, flexible, and suited to your schedule. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get started and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Closing out the show, Brandon, let's dive in here. So the rotation is a little tough to talk about because Kogi's out, Booker is out, but I just want to throw this at you because, again, I thought this game with Zeke Naji and Peyton Watson and Aaron Gordon as kind of the trio, the grouping of backup big options when Jokic was off the court, that it felt like a Thad Young game. Is this guy just not going to be playing? Did we all just get our hopes up and that one Houston game was like the only little taste of Thad Young we're going to get? What's going on here?
I think he'll have his moment. I think there's still probably a lot for him to process coming in the middle of the season to a new system, trying to learn some things. But I think he'll get his moment and run with it. He's a vet, but it's they're running out of time to really test some things. So I think, like I said, if Nurkic misses a game or if Eubanks misses a game, something like that, I think we could see more extended run. But I'm here for the small ball center. Like, I think there's some lineups I really want to see with him. I don't know if they're going to happen or not, but I still believe in Thad Young. I'm on board. I think he'll probably be limited more to like the 10 to 12 minute range. Like, if he does make a playoff rotation, it'll be in even shorter stints. But I think he still has something left in the tank and could help this team. So I'm here for it. I'm with you. Frank. I can't blame you for tonight because Drew was great, but we got to see some Thad.
Yeah, I guess it's just like, obviously you wouldn't necessarily think of the Nuggets as a team to try him on, try him against, I guess, but because of Jokic, I'm not saying he should necessarily be in the game when Jokic is in the game, although even then, right, like we've seen these teams try to guard Jokic with the smaller guy and then use some of their other players as help defenders. I don't know if that is necessarily strong enough to be that. They also are rolling out more zone lately, selectively, not a ton, but it's part of the game plan. We're seeing it almost every night now. I don't see why Thad Young couldn't be, one of the, if it's a 1-2-2 zone, one of the wing defenders. If it's a different kind of thing, maybe somebody more in the middle. That actually protects him. Like, I actually think that's a good place to play him. So I don't mean to take us on a tangent of a guy who didn't play, but I did just think we might see him. And again, we did not. So let's talk about let's do our box score oddity of the night, which to me was actually the turnovers in a good way. We saw the fourth quarter collapse again from this team, but it did not come with tons and tons of turnovers like we've seen at times. The Suns actually only had 9, and again, as I talked about with Jokic, as we've hit on a couple times now, the Nuggets did turn the ball over. So the Suns won that battle. Did this game give you optimism in that category to kind of clean things up, especially with Book still out of the lineup, or do you feel like it could just be back to those same issues on Thursday against Toronto, who gave them trouble on the road earlier in the season?
Oh, I think it absolutely gives me more confidence. I think, especially in that environment, Denver, like I said earlier, is a very tough place to play. The crowd feels like they're on top of you. The altitude, it is getting as ugly and as fast as it did at the end of that fourth. Like, you'd feel like they'd have a lot more turnovers than they did. So to me, that's encouraging. Is it a sign of things to come? I don't know, but I think that gives them the margin for error to win a game where Beal and Durant combined for 38% field goal shooting. Like, Durant missed 20 shots. Beal was, I think, like 6 for 18. So to have rough shooting nights like that, that's what gets you those extra possessions really do matter. And we saw it in full fruition tonight, just seeing how Denver could have used some of those shots that they turned away late, and maybe we're not in overtime, and vice versa. The Suns taking care of the ball just gave them every point they needed to put themselves in the position to get to an OT where they took advantage and just completely engulfed Denver with just an avalanche of offense that just came out of nowhere. So that was awesome. But yeah, as far as the turnovers, let's hope they're just turning a new page. I'll be the optimist here. Also, please give Bol and Thad Young more minutes. I'll be the advocate for them for life. That is my mission here.
So the one thing I would say on the turnovers is, and whatever. I don't mean for it to be harsh, but I guess another way to look at it is, especially late, I kind of feel like some of the bricked Durant shots in that fourth quarter, you could just count as turnovers, right? Like, if he didn't just kind of take the quick trigger jumpers that he did at times, maybe that results in a turnover. Or a worse shot for somebody else, right? Like, that's the alternative. But a lot of those plays are some of the ones where they would have turned it over in the past, either trying to get him the ball or him needing to pass out of something because the defense swarms him. Instead, it was just like, I'm just taking it, and he missed a lot of those. So is it really a better result? Obviously, a live ball turnover is worse than a live ball rebound. How much worse? I don't know. But that would be my 2 cents on that. Any last observations, any players, moments, tidbits we didn't get to, Brandon, before we wrap up?
David Roddy getting minutes tonight. Had an and one, so shout out David Roddy. That's
nice cut.
Yeah.
Stan Van Gundy shouted him out for the high IQ cut from the wing on the baseline drive, so earning the coach's love. But yeah, it's like, again, with you said Bol, I mentioned Thad Young. Like, I know David Roddy's not the same type of player. He's more of a wing. Those guys are bigs, but It's like those 5 minutes couldn't have gone somewhere else. I don't know. We'll see how the rotation evolves. Obviously, Okogie would have factored in if he was healthy. Saban Lee probably doesn't play if Okogie's healthy, so the health problems have created a lot of this. But another big test. Can the Suns get some revenge on Thursday against the Raptors? Have one more show for you between now and then, a recap of that show on Thursday night, and, of course, a bonus episode Saturday. A very big matchup, Suns-Celtics on Saturday night at home, ABC, all that good stuff. So hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. Get those shows and many more as we hit the stretch run of the season in your feed Monday through Friday. Check Brandon out over at Bright Side of the Sun, and I will catch you guys tomorrow.